Hey, welcome to Fresh Air at 5, episode 175. On this episode, you're going to hear me talk about some Innovators Mindset podcasts, some other things, and it's been a really good week. Was really inspired on, I think it was Tuesday, as I listened to Katie Milkman talk about change and overcoming those challenges. Pretty inspired by that. So without further ado, here we go. And summer starts.
Hi, this is Krista Lay.
And I'm Craig Aarons-Martin.
We are the co-hosts of the SEL in EDU podcast.
Proud member of the Education Podcast Network.
Each show on the network is independently owned, and the views expressed may not represent those of other podcasts.
For the best education podcast, visit edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Carpenter, coming to you every week from Abbotsford, which is about 45 minutes east of Vancouver, British Columbia, on the west coast of Canada. Fresh Air at 5 is my regular attempt to get some fresh air by walking about my neighborhood, which is located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Stolo people, the Simath First Nation and Mathwee First Nation. I consume podcast content while I walk, then reflect on this content in an unedited video, which I post on my X, formerly known as Twitter, channel every day. This podcast is the collection of the audio taken from those daily selfie videos over the course of a week, Monday to Friday. So let's jump into my listening and learning this past week. Monday, June 24, 2024, and this is the Monday of the last week of school. And so this week is different than others. Exams are done, working on report cards, transitioning courses to summer session teachers, and cleaning up my desk. So that's something I need to do. It's been a while. I need to go in and just get rid of stuff. And I'm going to do that this week. So yes. All right. This morning as I'm out walking, it's about 10 degrees Celsius. High overhead cloud. Sun has risen over there in the east. And it's a beautiful day. I hope it's doesn't rain today. We had a bit of rain yesterday, but that was okay. We need a little wet, and it helped a little bit. So it was good. Had a good weekend, and we're stepping into the week. So yes. All right. I'm bringing to you a new to me podcast, new to me, hashtag new to me podcast. And it is a podcast called Unleash Your Entrepreneurial Spirit. It's a long name, so they've changed it, breaking it down to Unleash Yes with Tom Schimmer and Natalie Verbasso as they bring us their very first episode. And Tom and Nat, so good to hear both of you talking. And this is a first episode, is an introduction to who you are, where your journey has come from, and how you've gotten to here to where you are as entrepreneurs with your learner-based business, and how you go and talk at conferences, you write books, you have a source of income that is related to being a consultant. And so it's pretty nifty to hear your story. Thank you very much for sharing, and I'm glad to project your story beyond through my podcast here and some of the things that are going on with Carpenter. Yes, you know, we think about where we are and how satisfied we are in our roles and our jobs. And, you know, we have to make sure that we're satisfied, we're content, not complacent. That's different than being content. So yes, take stock of that. Come back and listen to this. Subscribe to Yes, Unleash Yes with Tom and Nat, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye. Hey, PLN, it is June 26, 2024. This morning, I'm out for Fresh Air at 5. It's a beautiful day, and I listened to the Evolving with Gratitude podcast, episode 107, as Lainey Rowell has on change scientist Katie Milkman, Dr. Katie Milkman, out of the University of Pennsylvania. And this is a super interesting episode as they talk about overcoming the challenges of change. And we all talk about change and how change is good, but change is bad, and how we don't like it and how we do like it. And I've always said that I like change until I ran into a barrier about a year and a half ago where I was faced with giving up the Google, stuff in our district for the Microsoft stuff, and just the change of one to the other. I'm fully embedded in the Microsoft now, but it took some work and took some self-talk to convince myself that this is a good idea. It's really cool how Katie and Lainey talk about temptation bundling and how we put something that, we enjoy doing with something that we don't enjoy doing. This podcast, for example, gets me out the door walking, and I listen to podcasts typically only while I'm walking. So I don't listen to podcasts otherwise, and that is an incentive to do walking and get my heart rate up and to exercise. The second thing was talking about commitment devices and how we could use like the carrot and the stick being, if I don't go for my podcast, then I won't make myself a fresh cup of coffee when I get back. And it's kind of like a fine. And you know what? I went for my walk now. I'm going to get a cup of coffee. I'm going to make a fresh cup of coffee for myself and sit down, edit this, and get on with my day. There's lots of good stuff in here. I like the way that they talk about, the change and how we need to motivate ourselves. It's different for everybody. We see that. All right. Thanks, Katie. Thank you, Lainey. Have a fabulous day. Bye. One more thing for June 26, 2024. Just wrapping up. Not finished yet. The Tom Schimmer Show, his latest episode. Don't know the episode number, but there's only one recently, Tom, and I'm glad to hear your voice again on the airwaves. And I heard them on a different airwaves recently, and that's part of, I think, what you're talking about at the end of this episode. But this episode's called I'm Back, and it's good to hear that you're back and doing the things that you enjoy doing. Glad to hear that life is going well for you. Yes. Okay. You talked with Paula Maker, talks about literacy and about learning and about how we engage our scholars in learning and what does that mean as far as engagement, So this is a great episode. Lots to think about. I'm already thinking about the fall and how I approach teaching my students different skills. And am I actually teaching them about reading, or am I teaching them about learning? And, the reading is a part of it. I am not an avid reader, but this summer, right here, right now, I'm going to commit to reading a couple of books out loud. I have kind of alluded to it that I'm going to do that. I have the books at home. They're both about artificial intelligence. And I'm going to be reading these so that I can be a better learner moving forward and share some of this content with my students, not just for the fact of being a teacher in the building, and I'm here at school right now, but for the purpose of understanding this better for my own personal self. Being a model for my students is important. All right, that's all I got for now. I just got back from dropping my truck off at the shop. I'll have another listen later as I go back to get my truck. And I'll finish listening to the end of this episode, Tom, at that time. And thank you, Paula and Tom, for your conversation and your sharing. All right, keep it going. Thanks, bye. Hey, PLN, it's Thursday, June 27, 2024. We're getting close to the end of the week, which means that summer vacation is starting pretty quick here. I got a couple days to go and some tasks of cleaning my desk and tidying up equipment and things like that. Report cards are done. I'm so excited about that, and just the pressure that comes off when you get your report cards done is huge. All right, this morning I'm finishing up a podcast I listened to yesterday as I walked back to the garage to go get my truck. It was pouring rain. I had an umbrella, and it was 3 kilometers. But I learned and listened to Chris Jones on Seeing to Lead podcast, season 3, episode 78, as he has an interview with Samantha Ruth talking about anxiety and grief and how we need to understand that these items, these mental health items, are so very important. It's about, the person that is being affected. You have a loss, and Samantha talked very vulnerably about her loss of her husband, and then the struggle and the grief and the sadness, and how, people say, oh, well, it's been a while, you should be over it, and maybe not, and it's all dependent on who and how we are as ourselves. What support do we need? She started an organization called Grief Hab, and it's a Facebook group, it sounds like, and you can go and look up Samantha Ruth. The contact information for that is in this podcast episode show notes by Chris Jones. Thanks, Chris, for having Samantha on. In our schools here in BC, we are working on, social emotional learning, but that's a broad thing that happens in class. The individual support that students need, I think that's so important, having safe spaces, places they can go to tap out and just step out for a little bit. So doing my best to support my students, get to know my students. That's an important part, so I know how to respond to them when they need. All right, thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Chris. Have a fabulous day. On to another podcast. The last thing for June 27, 2024. It's lightly raining here. I'm heading home to make that fresh cup of coffee, and I'm looking forward to that. I listened to episode 273 of the Easy Ed Tech podcast as Monica Burns brings us an episode called Why Summer is the Perfect Time to Learn About AI. And Monica, I have decided for myself that I'm going to be reading a couple of books, one called Soulful, and the other, the new book by Dee Lanier and Ken Shelton about AI bias, and more about AI there. And I'm going to start considering taking a look at the resources you have on your website, because you provide a lot of content. Your episode, it did stop short for me on the Apple Podcatcher for some reason, not sure why, but you gave some good reasons why summer's a good time. The takeaway I get from this is that summer is a time that we can be playful. We don't have to do a lot of planning. We can spend time playing. And that's what we need to do with some tools, some toys, is to play and see what they can do before we go and sit down to implement them. If we haven't played, then it's hard to know what our students could do to play. And so how can we use these tools for fun in our own spaces and things like that? All right, that's all I've got for right now. Thank you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, bye. Hey PLN, it's Friday, June 28, 2024, marking the end of this school year. We're done today. We're done. I'm cleaning my desk and putting the tech to bed for the summertime and bringing in the IT support to clean up our computers and get things ready for the fall. And I'm stepping out today. Looking forward to it. Going on a road trip with my wife to Alberta this evening. And yeah, we're back on Sunday. Quick road trip, but picking up a boat. Then I'm going fishing next week. I am so excited. All right, this morning, I listened to the Innovators Mindset podcast, and I don't know the episode number. It might be there, George, but I didn't look. So it's not George's fault. It's my fault right now. And George has on his co-author of the new book that just came out called What Makes a Great Principal. And it's with Allison Apsey and George Couros that wrote this book, What Makes a Great Principal. And there are apparently, and I haven't got the book, 5 principles in the book, or 5 pillars in the book that are principles that we should look at for what makes a great principal. And pillar number 1 that they attend to this week, and they're going to give 5 of these, well, all 5 of them over the next 5 weeks, is building relationships inside and outside of the community and with ourselves. And what do we do to build those relationships? What do we do to grow ourselves in our communities? You know, and it's not about just building relationships for the sake of being nice people, because that's what we are, but it's about pushing the needle. It's about pushing the thing into learning so that we can improve student learning. That's our job, is to improve student learning. So with that, I'm going to close. It's so important. What do? I'm going to come right back and talk a little bit about that. So hang on. One more thing for June 28, 2024, continuing my thoughts on the Innovators Mindset podcast episode, where Allison Apsey, co-author with George Couros, they bring us pillar number 1 out of their book, What Makes a Great Principal, and it is building relationships inside and outside of the community and with ourselves. And how do we do that? Question was posed is, how do you build relationships with yourself or for yourself, and what do you do about that? One of the things I do to build relationships at school, and we're in a small staff, is I get to school early and I make my rounds and say hi to all the teachers. I just do that. I go door to door to door, check in, see how everybody's doing, and you know, you learn a lot about people just by the everyday little interactions, and people start opening up a little bit more and they share what's going on, and we cry together, we laugh together, and it just makes it better. So that's one thing that I do. Another thing that I found for building relationships in the communities that I find myself is to be on, you know, the executive committees or the boards of organizations. And you're like, okay, well, that's just work, right? But no, it's not just work. When I first started on my PETA board executive, I found myself wondering, how do these people know each other so well? It was about just spending time in executive meetings and planning conferences and doing the work of my PETA, the middle school teachers association here in British Columbia, middle years and primary and intermediate teachers association. That's what my PETA stands for. But what do we do? How do we do that? We work together. We go through the struggles together, and we're there to support each other, and it's pretty cool. So shout out to our president, Christina Preston, and our former president, Jenny Slack, for the work that they've done in growing our team. And team, you guys rock. It's amazing. So yes, those are some of the things that I do. And what do you do? Okay, with that, I'm going to go. Talk to you later. Bye. The last thing for June 28, 2024, on the heels now of pillar number 2 of What Makes a Great Principal by Allison Apsey and George Couros, is they bring us pillar number 2, which is teach or learn the way you expect your students to learn. And, you know, be a model of that learning and be authentic and out there in your learning. One of the reasons I have a podcast is so that my students can actually go and see that Carpenter is being a creative. He's making stuff and he is sharing from his heart, because that's what I'm expecting of my students. You know, I show videos of me going on trips. I show what I do on the weekends, and just to inspire and encourage my students that, you know what, their outside of school stuff actually makes a difference for the inside of school stuff. Yeah, I teach media design and graphic design and that design thinking, and where do we see that? And that's how I can go about doing that. What has challenged me with this, the 3 questions that George has asked, is one thing is that, you know, it's how do you know what the way that your students need to learn best? You know, you have to get to know them. So that's the relationship part. And we have to spend time with them, and we have to not, you know, necessarily right out of the gates going, these are my expectations. And you can do that. I think that's part of what you can do, but you have to keep those expectations pliable and malleable so that you can actually meet your students' learning needs. What do I agree with? I agree with, you know, that we need to model our learning in front of our students. I like what Adobe Express crew just said recently. Martinez, he said recently on a post coming out of ISTE, is that we are lifelong creators, you know, and we have to demonstrate that lifelong creation. If I'm asking my kids to do creative things with graphic design, etc., And then finally, what am I going to do moving forward? I'm going to be mindful of this. I'm actually going to order What Makes a Great Principal for myself and take a read of that. And I might even buy a couple copies, one for my principal and vice principal for them to read. Okay, talk to you. Bye. I appreciate you giving me a listen as I've created this podcast experience for you. It's like a unique Blinkist or Coles Notes version of the content I take in, like a highlight reel, so that you can hopefully find some other interesting podcasts you may not have considered before. I've recorded the specific episode podcast titles and episode numbers in the show notes, which are only a click or swipe away for your learning convenience. I've also started to put together a Spotify playlist of each of the episodes so that you can also take a listen to those specifically, and the link to that playlist is in the show notes. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes. And if you enjoyed this podcast and its format, share it with someone else. You can also follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Brian Carr, BRYONCAR, or at Fresh Air at 5. Tweet about your experience or give it a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Fresh Air at 5 can be found on the Educational Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. I hope you have a fantastic day. Get some fresh air before the day is out and take care of yourself because you are worth it.